All right, everybody, welcome to Astrology Hub TV, and thank you so much for joining us. My name's Amanda Pua Walsh, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Astrology Hub. And Astrology Hub TV is a weekly show that's dedicated to helping you explore your connection to the cosmos and how this connection can help you live a more empowered, fulfilled, and vibrant life. So we're here live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. If you'd like to receive Facebook messages every time that we go live, go ahead and click the link in the chat that will enable you to get live alerts. So again, those will just be little text messages or Facebook messages that show up on your phone or on your computer and let you know when we're live so that you won't miss a beat. Okay, so today we are here with Shamanic Astrologer Donna Woodwell. Donna is the managing editor for Astrology Hub, and for nearly 20 years, she's taught astrology and magic, including our own Shamanic Astrology course, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. And so today we're talking Saturn with a key underlying question of, is it possible to actually make friends with Saturn? So we shall soon find out. We're going to cover some key questions like how to gracefully navigate difficult Saturn transits like the Saturn Return. We're going to talk about keys for working with Saturn in Capricorn energy, since this is the transit that's going to be happening at the end of December. So we're going to talk about why that's important and how you can prepare for that. We're going to cover also specific rituals and ceremonies you can use to cultivate your relationship with Saturn. So you can turn this tune into Saturn's benevolent nature instead of feeling like you're being punished by Saturn. So we want to flip that whole thing upside down. At the end, we're going to talk to you about an exciting opportunity to work directly with Donna Woodwell and learn her shamanic astrology approach. So make sure you stick around and hear about that. But before we dive in, I just wanted to ask you all a few questions. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know that you're all starting to join us here. Okay, so a few questions, actually 3 questions that I have for you. The first one is, how many of you are in a Saturn transit right now or about to go into a Saturn transit? So if you are, just type in the chat, yes, I'm in a Saturn transit, or yes, I'm moving into a Saturn transit very soon. So we're going to look at these not right this second, but just if you type that in, then we'll be able to look at it in a little bit. Okay, second question. So go ahead and type those in. Second question, how many of you have a chart that's ruled by Saturn? Now, you may or may not know if your chart is ruled by Saturn, but if you do know, just go ahead and type, yes, my chart is ruled by Saturn in the chat. And then finally, how would you describe your relationship with Saturn or Saturnian energy, or however you want to think about it? How would you describe your relationship with Saturn and the influence that Saturnian energy has had in your life so far? So, okay, the 3 questions. Number 1, how many of you are in a Saturn transit right now or about to go into one? How many of you have a chart ruled by Saturn? And then how would you describe your relationship with Saturn? All right. Donna, hi.
Hi.
How are you doing over there?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Amanda.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so first question. Let's start, before we go into Saturn, let's talk about shamanic astrology in general, because I know that the way that you're going to talk about Saturn is through a shamanic astrology lens. So can you tell us what is shamanic astrology and how does it differentiate? How do you differentiate it from other astrological approaches?
Okay, well, that's actually a rather easy question once you consider that an astrology chart was invented by one culture, the Hellenistic Greeks, about 2,000 years ago. But there's a lot of other cultures on this planet that don't use charts. So anything before 2,000 years ago in Greece, from different tribes in Africa to North American Indians to the Hawaiians to on and on and on. Anyone who is looking up at the sky and noticing that the planets were moving around wanted to have a natural connection with them, wanted to feel like they were part of that cosmic dance of the sky spirits. That's a natural human thing to want to do. So what I call shamanic astrology is an approach that keeps that living essence of the planets in mind. And so you can connect to them directly for how they look in the sky to us, how they make us feel, rather than worrying so much about charts. Now, I love charts. We're not saying charts are bad, but this is the astrology that comes in the days before charts.
Okay, awesome. Now, Donna, this is maybe opening up a controversial can of worms, but can you tell us why that changed? Why the direct connection with the planets actually shifted over time?
Well, we're asking a question about why it shifted in Western astrology, because quite frankly, if you go to India, there are still temples to the planets. You can go and you can make an offering to what they call the Navagrahas, or the 9 spirits that sees you, which is a great way to talk about the planetary essences. But in the West, we've had a lot of cultural shifts over those last 2,000 years. And so once upon a time, in the age of the Greeks, there was a temple to Zeus, or a temple which became Jupiter, or a temple to Aphrodite, which became Venus. And you could go and make offerings and have conversations to the planets. So as the institutionalized church came together around 400 AD or so, astrology was still a valued part of church activities because it helped you figure out, everything from medical issues to what the weather was going to be like to where to plan church festivals. But the one thing they weren't allowed to do was have the temple to Jupiter and Venus and Saturn anymore, because there was a monopoly in the God department, so to speak. So that part of astrology, that idea that the planets were a living essence, began to fall out of favor or go underground. There are several ways they dealt with it. One, they became abstractions that were talked about only in occult circles, or they became renamed as archangels. So you could talk to the angel of a planet, but you couldn't talk to the planet, which is kind of splitting hairs to me. But, they were creative in their ways to work with that. And so we had sort of a tenuous relationship with the planets all the way through the Renaissance. Then by the time we got to the scientific revolution, astrology almost died completely in the West, mostly because it was losing its spiritual core. And it's only been in the 21st century that we've resurrected it in a way that's even remotely close to what the ancients were doing. So it's always been there. It's just fashion comes in and out of favor with cultural belief systems.
Okay, I'm having so much fun perusing the comments about people's Saturnian relationships, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But let's talk about Saturn for a sec. Why is that a dreaded word for so many of us? Why the heaviness around Saturn, the planet, and the energy of Saturn?
Well, to the ancient Greeks, the Hellenistic Greeks, Saturn was known as the greater malefic. Malefic is such an ominous word in and of itself. But the reason Saturn, and of course Mars too, were considered malefic planets wasn't because they were evil. It was because the way they made us feel wasn't necessarily as buoyant as some of the other planets. Saturn's job is to help us ground and be in the present moment and understand that humans need limits. We need to have some kind of restrictions, because unrestricted growth we have a word for that. It's called cancer. When things grow completely out of control. In the ancient times, Saturn actually ruled over a golden age. And the golden age of Saturn was defined by the idea that everyone had such perfect self-discipline, that we always did what was precisely right. And so we had no need for laws, and we had no need for police or punishment, because we behaved ourselves, in a sense. And so that's when we say that Saturn is punishing, that's only because we don't really understand how to work with the energies of Saturn, which teaches us how to be acting with our own intent. The word they use is temperance, to have some kind of middle path that could help us avoid all the excesses of life. That's the gift of Saturn.
Okay. All right. And I think that's reflected in the comments. I just want to read a few. So for those of you just joining, I asked about people's relationship with Saturn and how that is. Jasmine says, my relationship with Saturn has always been problematic. However, I picked Saturn for Donna's soul work and it was pretty flippin' awesome. We're like BFFs now. which is awesome. Leslie says, when I worked with and surrendered to my Saturnian lesson, my Saturn return has been a beautiful blessing, hard but good. Dave says, without Saturn, I'd probably be in a bad place. And Sylvia asked a question about how do we know if our chart is ruled by Saturn, which I think we can talk about in a sec. But Diane says, I love Saturn. I have my Mercury, Mars, and Sun in Capricorn, and I am 70 years old. My first Saturn return was horrible. My second was wonderful. I work hard and use Saturn well. So lots of different perspectives there. All right. For those that, actually, why don't we start with that question about how do we know if our chart's ruled by Saturn or if we have a lot of Saturn in our chart?
Okay. Well, traditionally, Saturn rules the winter. It's the cold, the dark. Saturn was an agricultural god, and it had to do with how we contract. So in an astrology chart, the two signs of winter are Capricorn and Aquarius, because they're both opposite the signs of summer, obviously. And so if you have, traditionally, when you say a planet rules a chart, it's whatever rules the rising sign. So Saturn, if you have a rising sign of Capricorn or Aquarius, you would traditionally be ruled by Saturn. Having a lot of Saturn in your chart simply means that you have planets in one of those two signs. So if you have Sun, Moon, midheaven, something else in either Capricorn or Aquarius, that could end up being an awful lot of Saturn in your chart. You could also have Saturn sitting on top of one of the angles in your chart. So rising on the horizon, high up overhead, those could be a dominating Saturnian influence. And you might know it. A lot of people already know what their planetary best friends are in some way, because the themes that Saturn represents, the need to create structures, the need to be grounded, the need to honor the earth. All of these kinds of things can be indicators of having a lot of Saturn. The need to have everything have a practical application, that it's not just airy-fairy theory stuff. It's something that you can embody and inhabit. That's Saturn too. So when I start with new students of shamanic astrology, I say, don't worry so much about what's rising or where things are until you have a chance to learn your astrology. You can establish these relationships and start feeling the planets, because we've got them all anyway. Saturn's somewhere in your chart. It's not hiding. And so wherever it is, start there for the relationship and start building a better one for yourself.
Wow. It just totally resonates. As you know, Donna, I have my Sun, my Venus, my Mercury all in Capricorn. And then I have my rising in Aquarius and my Saturn in Leo. So but just because you have a desire for these things, does it always mean that you're good at them? Because I would say I have a desire for structure, but I'm not always that great at creating it. So it's not necessarily a gift, but
there's also other pieces in your chart. I mean, I know your chart, Amanda, of course, I know your chart.
Right. Well,
so we know there are other things that kind of balance it out. That just means it's in there somewhere. And when Saturn's important, it's important for you to find a way to express the values that Saturn represents, because you are kind of his avatar in some ways. And in working through your own life, you're allowing Saturn to feel what it is to have a human life. And so you're working out the details.
Yeah, well, and you all will hear me say so many times, we're here to make astrology practical and applicable and relevant in your daily life, because that's been a huge drive.
That's
even just
Saturn.
Yeah, it's super Saturn. Okay. All right. So for those who have had challenging Saturn transits, have a lot of Saturn in their chart, have a chart ruled by Saturn, and have felt kind of like kicked around, or punished, which is a word that a lot of people feel associated with Saturn. How can they begin to shift that relationship?
Well, always start first with understanding what Saturn is and what Saturn isn't. I mean, Saturn in Roman terms was an agricultural god. So he had to do with knowing when it was time to plant the seeds and then harvest the seeds. And also knowing that for every seed that's planted, if you want to eat, you're going to have to kill it. And there's that process of understanding that life is one day at a time, one moment at a time, and it requires us to keep an eye on the present moment. And so all kinds of mindfulness exercises And anytime you slow down and are present and grounded, those are things that are going to start the process of being more in tune and aligned with Saturn, because that's what Saturn calls us to do. And believe me, I know right now, because I have Sagittarius rising. And for the last 3 years, Saturn has been in my rising sign of Sagittarius. And I mean, just to digress a small bit, Sagittarius likes to be expansive and think about the future, and it's always a party and always look on the bright side. And to have Saturn in Sagittarius when you are Sagittarius rising, plus I have my moon there, it's been a year of having to learn how to, what's most important right now. I can't fix the entire future. I can't have these grand visions like I'm used to having. I have to focus on what I can do today. And that's been a lesson for me. It's the same when people are having Saturn transits to their other planets. There's something about them that's going to ask you to roll up your sleeves, put in the work, be mindful and present. And once you can get that done, then you can start playing with things that might make it a little easier, and building rituals and routines and things around it so that you can honor this work that you're doing.
Okay. And you're going to teach us some rituals a little bit later, right? Okay. So would you say, is there anything else you would say specifically about Saturn transits and how, I mean, so I just heard be present with the energy, be mindful, don't try to be too far out into the future.
Slow down.
Deal with what's right in front of you. What other practical, tangible advice do you have for people in terms of dealing with difficult Saturn transits?
Well, in some ways, Saturn transits are a little easier to deal with than some others, because he responds really well to you making a list, doing the things on the list, checking them off one at a time, being responsible for yourself, accountable. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. People have a harder time with Saturn transits when they get, when they overburden themselves, or they take on responsibility that isn't theirs, or they take on responsibility for things and then they don't deliver. And it's much better to simplify. And when you connect to those Saturn values, things get a little easier, because that's what the whole idea of transits are. Think of planets as like the 7 crayons in a box. And we all have those 7 crayons in a box, and we're coloring our whole lives with those crayons. It's just some points in time we're picking up a different crayon. And when you're having a big Saturn transit, you're picking up the Saturn colored crayon, and it's saying, I'm going to take all these things in my life, and they're going to be up for review. In the case on my ascendant, it's how am I using my physical space, my essential way I move through the world, because that's what the first house represents. And how can I bring more Saturnine self-discipline into it? How can I bring more willingness to honor my commitments and don't overcommit? Saturn can be as much about taking a vacation as it can be about working. That's the thing we think it's like, oh, it's always work, 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 and I'm going to be overburdened. I'm like, no, it's all about understanding the right amount, the temperate amount that you need to be able to do exactly the work that you need to do in the world. And so it should be giving you the capacity to stretch, the capacity to serve, but recognizing that you alone can't do everything. So we had no Saturn. Saturn rules bones, for example, rose bones. If we had no Saturn bones, we would just be a blob of mushy goo on the floor, and we wouldn't be able to do anything. You know, no Saturn, no ballet. Saturn gives us the ability to stand at the bar and go first position, second position, third position, over and over and over again, to the point where we become these graceful beings. No Saturn, no grace.
I love that, Donna. So one of the things that was coming up for me when you were talking about the right amount of work, and it could mean vacation, I think one of the challenges that Saturn might be pointing out for us is when we say yes to things out of obligation or out of a sense of I should be doing this, versus that true intrinsic pull to do some sort of work in the world. Would you say that's true? Because I know that like that word obligation has been one that I've had to work with a lot in my life.
And that's a Saturn conundrum, because Saturn is that which rules our ability to commit. and to feel duty bound. Except that, are we really fulfilling our obligations when we're trying to fulfill everybody's obligations?
Right.
What happens when we take on too much or things that aren't our responsibility? Saturn doesn't respond to that, because Saturn's about taking on the right amount, the ones that are relative to you. And so anytime you're having a big Saturn transit, you're going to have to deal with those kinds of things. So so the guilt and things come up because of a relationship with Saturn that's still under development, because you haven't learned what right relationship to Saturn looks like yet.
Well, and I think there's a huge difference between obligation and commitment, because to me, commitment is something you opt into and you say yes to out of a place of really wanting to do that, versus obligation. It's like you're taking something on because you feel like you have to out of guilt or those things. And one of the things that's helped my Saturnian parts of myself deal with that guilt thing is an understanding that anytime I do something out of a sense of obligation, everybody loses, because I'm not really showing up because I truly want to be there and I truly want to help or whatever. I'm showing up because I feel like I have to, which carries a certain energy with it that doesn't positively affect anybody, even if I'm helping them. So I've discovered that, doing things because I have to evaluate, am I doing this because I feel like I have to, or am I doing this because I really want to? And if I feel like I have to, I know that not only I'm going to lose, but everyone else is going to lose, even the person that I'm doing something for, because I feel like I have to do it for them.
Yeah, exactly. Your kids might like this. This is one of my favorite books on a Saturn theme. It's Madeline's A Wind in the Door. It's the sequel to A Wrinkle in Time. So in this book, one of the protagonists, Charles Wallace, gets really sick. His cells can't develop the ability that they can't process oxygen and things anymore. And so his sister and her sister's friend have to go on a magical journey into the cells of his body and have a conversation with these different parts of the cell. And really, essentially what's happening is the cell itself goes through a process she calls deepening, and the cells are refusing to deepen. So some of the younger ones, they just want to run and play and skip around, and they don't understand that in deepening, they get their greatest freedom. And that's what Saturn is trying to teach us. By deepening, by committing, by being fully invested in the present, all of a sudden, we can expand and touch the rest of the cosmos. So we're not losing our freedom, we're just shifting it into a much more profound form. And that's what Saturn is trying to get us to do. Now, people might call it adulting. It's the whole process of adulting, where you recognize that by being responsible, by living in alignment, by paying all your bills, by making sure the basic stuff is taken care of, you have ultimate freedom, or at least a lot more of it, to go and pursue the things that you want, because you no longer have to worry about a life that's spinning out of control, or that you're constantly reacting to circumstances, because you've simplified, you've gone through auditing what you're doing, does it relate to what's important to you, and let go of the rest. Yeah. That's what Saturn can let us do. So why would we not want a relationship with Saturn?
Well, it's because of that word adulting. I have to say, we grow up with this idea of becoming adults and maturing as not ideal. We live in a culture that completely values and glorifies the youth. And one of the commitments I've made to my children is that I will model for them that growing up is actually joyful, is actually amazing, and that life just keeps getting better and better and better. I read this quote one time. It said, it's the responsibility of every adult to have fun so that the children have something to look forward to. And I love that. So it's bringing in this attorney, and it's our responsibility to live fulfilled, glorious lives so that our children aren't going to go, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to become an adult. Because if we make it look awful and boring and, disconnected and not fulfilling and all those things, then who would want an adult?
Exactly. And Amanda knows I'm in the middle of this amazing experience right now. So my first boyfriend that I dated when I was 14 years old is actually visiting me right now. He found me on the internet after 30 years. So we've had a chance to talk about what it is to grow up. And it's like having a snapshot of my younger self walking around in my house. And to see the difference between who I was when I was 14 and who I am now, and what's changed and what hasn't. And both of us have said independently that, yeah, well, I mean, personally, I was in gaga land over, but how much feelings deepen when you get older. They're much more nuanced. They're much more powerful because they're grounded, and they're not this drama queen kind of that you have when you are a teenager. And that's, again, the beauty of Saturn. So we always get more Saturn as we get older, but there's a certain grace and willingness to feel things more deeply because we're not afraid of it anymore. And we're also willing to accept the consequences of things because we understand it in a different way. So again, hail Saturn.
What is that one saying about Capricorn? But I'm sure this is Saturn in general, that Capricorns, I know this is sun sign, so it's limited, but Capricorns are old when they're young and young when they're old.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That sounds like
a lot of Saturn in chart is when people come up to little kids and say, wow, they look like they're old souls in a young body.
Do you know what people used to always say about me? She's got a good head on her shoulders. I can see that she's got a good, all the parents would say that about me. That's the Saturn right there. Okay. Let's transition. Okay. So tell us, there is a big transit at the end of December, Saturn moving into Capricorn. And for those of you who are not listening to this live, who are tuning into the recording, this is going to be relevant for what, 2 years? Is that right?
Almost 3.
Almost 3 years. So this is going to be relevant for us for a long time. But this transition is happening at the end of December. Can you tell us about Saturn moving into Capricorn?
Absolutely.
And why it's so important.
So excited. Saturn's coming home. So every 30 years, Saturn gets to come back into its own signs of winter. And when a planet comes home, it's actually able to do its work in the world much more efficiently because it's surrounded by all the stuff that it likes to work with. In the case of Capricorn, it's the earthy side of Saturn. It's the pragmatic side of Saturn. So we're coming into a 3-year period where we thought mindfulness was important before. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Is what we're doing being considerate and mindful of the entire process that we're living in? Is this the simplest way that we can do this? Is this the most accountable way that we can do this? And we're going to see a lot of shifts in maybe some of the excessive things that we do that we don't need anymore. It might be falling away because we recognize that's not how we want to spend our time. That's not how we want to spend our resources. And it's going to affect everything from individuals to, large corporations to nation states. And maybe we need some of this right now. Maybe we need some reassessment of our relationship to Earth, because Capricorn's an Earth sign, and our environment should have a lot of significance for the environment. And yet, no surprise, hey, you've been watching the news lately. Wait, all kinds of things are happening in the world that are making us go, wait, climate change really is here. We can't keep doing what we're doing and not think that there are any consequences. So this is definitely a 3-year period. We might see a lot of I just saw on the news that the United States is still the only holdout for the Paris Accords now because everyone else, it's just us. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we will get some resolution on that. So we could all act as one world moving forward and recognizing that the changes that need to happen, the discipline that we have to use, the self-restraint that we have to start practicing in order to physically change our relationship to our environment. All those kinds of things, I think, are absolutely perfect timing. That's why I love the planets. The things work out when they need to.
I know, it's amazing. So the saying, there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed, seems like it would be pretty relevant in the next 3 years.
Absolutely perfect.
I don't remember who said that. Dalai Lama or someone.
And they know they were wise beyond their years.
And now, would you also say that the word sustainability is a Saturn in Capricorn? Because every time you're talking about the energy, I'm imagining a canoe, and the canoe is either leaking energy, there's leaks in it, so there's water coming through, or it's sealed up. And when it's sealed up, the energy is conserved so that, it can move, it can fly across the water. So this idea of energy conservation in the simplification, and also sustainability. So,
well, think about what you just said. A canoe is like a skin that creates a bubble that you can move around in. And skin and barriers are ruled by Saturn. So a barrier with a hole in it is a Saturn which has a problem. So when you fix the hole so it's not leaking and it's all contained, that's a healthy Saturn. It's a perfect metaphor.
Okay. All right. I'm just sorry. I'm looking at some questions and seeing if we should take a few. But I think I would like to go into the rituals. So, okay. So we're going Saturn in Capricorn. Is there anything? I mean, I know I'm already feeling the energy, like really strong.
Too.
The desire to create structure, the desire to have more structure in my day, the desire to have more structure in our company, and really understand things and not have so much chaos and waste.
Not have so much wasted energy. Yeah.
Yeah. In all areas of life, I feel it really coming through strong already. Right. So I don't know if all of you out there are feeling that, but this kind of the desire to, and I know that sometimes comes with the end of the year because we're going into the new year and all that, but it feels way stronger this year for me than any other year.
Saturn is a sign of winter. So that feeling of denning up and needing to pack things away for the winter and harvest the crops and get it all organized with your little label maker, that's a Saturn pull that we feel every year. But right now we're also feeling it at its height of its 30-year cycle, in addition to feeling it at the end of the year. So that feeling is going to carry through more profoundly, through the rest of the year as well. It's giving us sort of an overlay of winter in the next, till 2000 and I'm doing my math right now. What day is it? It's going to 2018, 2019, till 2020.
And supposedly 2020 is astrologically.
It's a huge year.
It's a huge year. And so, but Saturn in Capricorn is ending that year?
Yes, because Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter will be catching up with it. And so we will have Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto all conjunct at the end of Capricorn, the beginning of Aquarius. And that's it's called a grand conjunction. And they used to think of it as the turning of the generations. They happened every 20 years. It was a big generational marker, which heralded the shift of regimes. And so put that into the context that it's between two eclipses in North America. That's a big sort of sea change of, wow, we're entering a whole new 20-year period, and what that will look like, is somewhat determined by what we give away, what we let go of, what we simplify in the process while all these things are setting up, because things in the past tend to set up what we have in the future, and we're just in the setup period right now.
Yeah, I remember when Maurice Fernandez said in our 2017 forecast, he said that whatever structures we're building now need to be built with the utmost integrity, because anything that doesn't have that really solid foundation or really deep roots in the soil is going to get toppled over in 2020. That basically what we're building now needs to be really firm and solid and true and integrity for us. So
sounds perfect to me. I totally agree with that.
Okay. All right. So now we know this is huge for all of us. So whether or not you have Saturn strong in your chart, whether or not your chart is ruled by Saturn, it doesn't actually matter so much, because it sounds like we're all going into a major Saturn transit. So can you tell us some rituals or ceremonies or something that we can do to start to make friends with Saturn in the shamanic astrology approach?
In the shamanic astrology approach. Well, anyone who knows me knows that I'm all about doing things very simply with what we have. I mean, there are all kinds of books from the Picatrix and on magic that has all these complicated rituals that say, go out and get a pure undyed sheepskin and do X, Y, and Z. And yeah, that's great if you live in a culture where you have access to those kinds of things, but I don't. And I think when we start thinking shamanically, we recognize that everything around us is resonating with one of the planets. And so you should be able to walk around your own house or your own grocery store if you know what you're looking for and pick up things that have the essence of Saturn. And all these things we've already talked about is, you know, things that are dark, because Saturn's the farthest away, the dimmest, and the slowest of the planets. So those can be representatives of Saturn in your life. Things that are grounding, things that have beautiful structure, all those things can also represent Saturn. So to have any of those in your life at any point in time and marry them to your intention, which is really the key. It's the intention that you're doing it as a way to honor and connect Saturn. You can come up with all kinds of rituals that you can incorporate into your daily life in easy, simple ways. So I brought some examples because it's like show and tell when we come on these things. So I grabbed one of my coffee cups. It's dark blue. Saturn likes dark colors. I don't have a black one, but maybe you have a black one. Coffee is a dark thing, so Saturn likes it because it's dark. See, I know, I saw that. We came up with the same cups, and she didn't even know. I have black tea in here right now. There's no actual coffee in it, but you could make a mug of coffee for yourself or a mug of black tea and have a little momentary dedication prayer of, hey, Saturn, let's work together today. And as you drink the tea, continue to consume that intention. And that's all it takes. And if you did that every single day, you would automatically bring your attention to establishing that relationship with Saturn in a very simple way. It doesn't have to be all about, you know, repeating traditional mantras, although it can. There are mantras for all of these things in Western astrology and Indian astrology that if you want to dive into, go for it. But it can also be, and Saturn likes simplicity. The simplicity and pure intention of the moment, he respects that because he is a god that has to do with simplicity. So that's one possibility. Another thing, it was just Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead here in Texas. So we have all kinds of little skulls and things all around, which are a great way to celebrate Saturn if you've got anything like this in your world, because he rules bones and structure, because it's the structure of our world. He also rules the dead. So I picked up a whole bunch of like these $1 candles in the store that I could put in the closet whenever I wanted to have like a little candle celebration of Saturn. I could pull out one of these. But if you don't have this, I live in Texas, so this is an option. You just get a plain old black candle holder and just a candle holder, and you could have like a Saturn candle whenever you want to spend some time, you know, getting some more discipline in your life. Say, today I need to be disciplined and do X, Y, and Z and actually do them. Saturn, can I get a little bit of help? You know, get a candle and light one for Saturn and let the candle burn down. If you want to lighten it up a little bit, you can always take white. This is Venus color. And that's when you start getting into some deep astrological magic, like we talk about in shamanic astrology. You learn how to balance the excesses of one planet with another, so that if Saturn's feeling way too heavy to you, get a little Venus and lighten it up. I mean, this is how the ancient Greeks used to think about astrology charts. The original model of a chart was actually a boat, a Greek trireme that they rowed. They had the slaves that rowed it, and they would travel all around the Mediterranean in them. And the role of Saturn was the guy with the whip. He was the one who would crack the whip so that all the rowers would row. But he didn't need to crack the whip if Venus, the flute player, was playing her little flute, because everyone knew the time and they were getting it from the music rather than from the harsh control of Saturn. So Venus always had the capacity to take the edge off of Saturn. So if you're feeling too overwhelmingly Saturnine, bring in some Venus so that she can help soothe the savage beast or take the rough edges off of the coarse parts of Saturn. So that's another thing you can do. You can always find found things in your world. This is actually a vulture feather, and vultures are birds that obviously eat the dead. They clean up the carrion and they recycle things back into the environment. Recycling is a great Saturnine pastime. So I picked this up, so whenever I need some Saturn, I can put this on my desk and honor one of Saturn's creatures. For Amanda, I brought my kukui nuts out of the closet. Kukui nuts are a sacred tradition in Hawaii. They are nuts that are burned in lamp oil to create light. And so I think you said earlier, they're like the seeds, literally, they're seeds of light, which is exactly what Saturn is. When we get to the Saturn moment, you know, the darkest day of the year is when the sun enters into Capricorn. So that's the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. But it's also the seed of the light to come, because, you know, at that time of year, the days start getting longer again. And that is the seed of knowing that the sun is being reborn. And we celebrate it in the Christian tradition as the birth of Christ, because the light is returning to the world. And there's a reason the church adopted that day, because they were watching the sky too. So they knew what it meant. If you happen to be lucky enough and can get some kukui nuts that I picked up when I was in Hawaii the last time I was there, but I'm sure Amanda can give you some ideas on where to get them. These are a great Saturn, like they're literally a lei for Saturn. We can wear them around. You can pick up Saturn minerals, anything dark, obsidian, jet, things like that. Those can be like that you have in bracelets or rings or something. You can dedicate one of them to Saturn as like your marriage wedding ring for working with Saturn for a period of time. So there's just so many ways. But even when you're doing something that is one of Saturn's favorite things to do, when you're being responsible, when you're being accountable, you're strengthening your relationship with Saturn just by doing it. All you got to do is bring a little bit of awareness to the fact that you are working with Saturn. And then you go, oh yeah, I got it. I can do that. So that's the simple way. So those are the simple ritual things. And ritual just means something that you do consistently over and over again, so it becomes a habit that has a sacred dimension to it. That's all ritual is. It's not like it's a set aside thing. It's just the habitual, so that your mind gets into the routine and the rhythm of working together. You want to go the ceremony route? Sure, we can build ceremonies. I advocate all of my students sit down and learn how to have a guided visualization conversation, so that you can add even more dimension to how you relate to Saturn personally, because we're all a little bit different. You know, Amanda's relationship to Saturn will have its own history, a little different from mine, because Saturn's in a different place in our charts. And so for me, Saturn is in my 7th house. It's on the descendant, and I admit it, Saturn makes me horny. I can't help it. I always know when someone has a lot of Saturn in their chart, because I'm getting aroused, and I'm like, God dang it, it's my chart.
Oh my God.
That just happens to be my personal relationship with Saturn. And but being able to do guided visualizations, because I'm not going to read about that in books. Most people have a very stereotypical discussion of Saturn when you read, because they're copying from somebody else who copied from somebody else who copied from someone else, and it tends to follow suit. But when you develop your own personal relationship with each one of the planets, there's more space for that kind of nuance, and you can talk through, oh yeah, I feel this way. And once you get to know them a lot better, more deeply, more intimately, no pun intended in my case, you have a lot more flexibility to call on them when you need them. So, and it's what the Shamanic Astrology program is all about. Develop a relationship with all the planets. And then if you're feeling overly Saturn, you just say, hey, Venus, where are you? Please show up, Venus. And then you can pull in that Venusian energy, and you can lighten yourself, and you don't have to worry so much about finding something else to do it for you. So it's like developing a set of levers in your own life, and you can just pull one up and push one down and so on, so that you're constantly learning how to live in balance with all the energies internally, rather than needing something external or being subject to what's happening in the cosmos at the time. If you're feeling too much Saturn in the cosmos, you just turn up your internal Venus and maybe Mars, warm yourself up, make it a little more fun, and then having a Saturn transit isn't such a heavy, dark experience. There you go.
Very good, Donna. Thank you so much. So, and I love how you do that. You really make the relationship with the planets you show us how to make those our own. And so that we can really internalize and work with the energy versus always having to rely on other people to tell us what things mean or how things are going to feel or how we're going to experience things. It truly is, it's ours to explore and discover, which is so much more fun and empowering.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds to me like anyone who is wanting to bring in some more discipline in their lives, who is wanting to work with time in a new way, who is building foundations right now. So maybe starting a new business or a new relationship or anything that needs to have some deep roots.
Or has been overwhelmed by the last 3 or 4 years and really, really has this urge to simplify.
Simplify. Yes, I love that too. When you were talking about the vulture and how the vulture eats the dead, it's like any one of us who feels like there's dead weight or things that we need to let go of, and maybe we're having a hard time doing that because that's not always the easiest thing to do. Cultivating the relationship with Saturn will help us with those kinds of things as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So lots of very practical application for our new Saturn relationship. I swear I won't be able to drink tea out of this mug without thinking of Saturn ever again.
But that's good. That's good. Because it means once we recognize that almost everything around us has some kind of connection to a planet, you know, all different planets, of course, but we realize we're surrounded by a symphony all the time. And it's just a matter of opening up to the magic in every moment that's present in that symphony, because then we can move with it rather than feel like we're being trapped by it.
Absolutely. We can contribute to it too.
Yeah.
So we can actually contribute our own music and
that's the true definition of co-creation.
Exactly. Okay. Donna, we have something very exciting to share with the audience. Anyone who missed Donna's Shamanic Astrology Level 1 training course the first time we offered it, which was about a year and a half ago. Is that about right?
A year ago, actually.
Exactly a year ago?
Yeah, we launched it on Halloween-ish of 2000. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So if you missed it the first time around, we have now reopened it and it's actually new and improved. So you can actually join Donna's Shamanic Astrology Level 1 training course now. Donna, do you want to tell everybody about that course, what your inspiration was for it, and how, what they'll get as a part of it?
Sure. Okay. So I started putting this course together years ago because I was fortunate enough to have had, from a very early age, live training in shamanic circles for over 10 years. My instructor was amazing. She had lived on a Native American reservation for years, and I had the benefit of sitting in circles every week, working with planetary energies, working with all kinds of other energies, the rocks and the trees and so on. And then on top of that, I met a Hermetic magic teacher, and we had another 5 years of learning how to design rituals and so forth, and work with states of mind, for lack of a better term. So when I got into astrology, I looked around at conferences and things like, why isn't anybody working like this? This is what empowers astrology. And it wasn't until I met a Vedic astrologer and saw what they were doing and felt that inrush of planets, and I was like, wow, it's here. Where is it in Western astrology? So I went back several thousand years and started pulling out the threads in our own tradition of how they thought about the planets thousands of years ago. And then I used my own training to sort of build a bridge back from a modern mindset, using a lot of hypnosis, a lot of astrological understanding, to explain it in a way that makes it really easy for people who want to reconnect with those planetary essences, to make them allies in your own life, to do it and then create a practice that's sustainable, whether it's just for you yourself, or if you're a longtime astrologer, to deepen what you're doing with astrology and then work that way with others so that your clients can have the same kind of experience.
And I love this because if you have been studying astrology for many years, this is bound to bring in a whole nother dimension to your readings. If you're a professional astrologer, or if you just like to look at charts and look at your own chart, this is going to bring a whole new lens to look at it through. And then if you're new to astrology and you haven't been studying for a long time, this gives you a foundation where you'll actually be cultivating your own direct relationship with the planetary energies so that you, again, don't have to rely on someone else telling you what they're about. You actually can experience them in your body.
Right, and it truly will make you fluent in astrology much faster because it does engage both sides of your brain, the intuitive side and the intellectual side at the same time. The thing that blew me away by the class the first time was how profound and transformative an experience was for everybody in it. And people were talking about the experiences that they had, working with the guided visualizations for each one of the planets. The program is based into 12 modules, and it has a couple introductory modules, and then a module for every single one of the planets, which includes the science of the planet, examples of avatars of that planet through history, and how you can work with the energy of the planets in its stones, its plants, its people that are related to it, and so on, plus a guided visualization for everyone. And a training, a 2-module training on how to create a guided visualization, basically Hypnosis 101 in a crash course, plus a lot of bonus material that teaches you how to use this with others and so forth. So people would go, and as we went through the planets, they'd share, oh, Mars, this is what Mars told me. Oh, no, this is what Mars told me. And it became this rich tapestry of experiences that was so, I mean, it was profound to me. And I feel so honored to have gotten to witness that process. People still talk to me now a year later, like, that changed my life. That changed my understanding of astrology. Or some of the astrologers who said, wait, I thought I was the only one. That all this private experience of people who have had these kind of relationships with their planets didn't realize that anybody else was doing it in a similar way, and to create community around that so that people realized that that was a part of our inheritance. That is our astrological inheritance. We are meant to be priests and priestesses of the cosmic realm. That's what it is to be an astrologer. And to bring that back in a practical, pragmatic kind of way has been very special for me.
Yeah, I remember people saying, I didn't know there was a name for this. I've been doing this since I was a child, and I didn't know there was a name. Like, you could call it shamanic astrology. So just a couple other things. So the course is now open. The link to join is in the chat. It's also in the description of this video. And then on November 15th, so Donna's added in a new element to the course, and that is a live shamanic ceremony once a month. So if you join before November 15th, which is next week, you'll get to join us for that first live ceremony, live shamanic ceremony. It does include a private Facebook group, as Donna was saying. So you'll be joining a community of shamanic astrology lovers who are all exploring their relationship directly with the planets. If you want to try it out, there is a 30-day guarantee. So if you buy the course and you realize that it's not for you, you have 30 days to get your money back with no questions asked. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about the shamanic astrology course?
I'm so excited to be able to work with everyone who works this way. It's a bridge between, astrology over the years has had, we've kind of been intellectually boxed because we can get so very focused on our charts, and we forgot that we're part of a larger magical, metaphysical tradition, especially in the West. So this reconnects us to all kinds of people. It reconnects us to those who are practicing paganism and magic. It reconnects us to people who are working with spiritual practices, with the shamanic traditions. It reconnects us to the traditional Western medical traditions, because it brings in that holistic approach that helps you understand why certain herbs were used for certain things. So there's all kinds of crossovers. And if you're the kind of astrologer who really values studying the crossover of astrology and other things, it's a great place to start. And it's magic.
Yeah, you know what? And you're getting a lot of agreement in the chat too. So thank you, Keleneka and Jen and Denise and Stephanie, some who have already taken your course and are echoing what you're saying. The other thing is you will get a level 1 certification or a certificate of completion. And it is a prerequisite for the level 2 shamanic astrology and level 3 shamanic astrology that Donna will be offering in the near future. So if you kind of want to go down this stream of shamanic astrology, this is definitely the place to start. And now will be a great time to join so that you can get into the cycle of the shamanic rituals and ceremonies that will be happening.
And plus, once you join, it's always there. And now, and this is why I'm so excited to be adding these ceremonies to the mix, because it brings in a live component that we can continue working together ceremonially. And that's the thing that I cherish the most about my own shamanic training, is that we could meet and work and co-create that sacred space together, because that's the energy that powers the connection to our planets, to other spirits, and that we found ways to do it online now and like make a whole circle that encompasses the world. That's amazing. That's a gift in and of itself.
It's so true. And I know that we are going into the holiday season, so a lot of you are probably thinking, I don't have time to do a course right now. 12 weeks right now is challenging. But just keep in mind what Donna just said. You can pace yourself and move into the content in any way you want. So if you wanted to just take one module for the next 12 months and study each module just one 1 month at a time and just take your sweet, precious time with it, you could do that and then still be joining those ceremonies once a month as well.
And we've also set it up so that there's like a theme of the week, because there are 12 modules plus the bonuses. And there's actually 13 weeks between an equinox and a solstice and an equinox. So we're just going to repeat the ceremonial cycle, starting with each equinox and solstice from the beginning. So it doesn't matter where you join in. And the course is not as sensitive to what order, because it's like, okay, you can do Saturn first, you can do Jupiter first, you can switch the order depending on what you need. So you can skip around in this course and still get an incredible, rich experience from the course.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Donna. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to Astrology Hub TV. We will be here same time, same place next Thursday. And if you do not receive live alerts yet, please sign up for live alerts so that every time we go live, you get a Facebook message sent right to you that says, we're on live, join us. It'll also give you the topic of the day and the astrologer that we're working with. And I just want to thank you, Donna, again, for your time, for your wisdom. I'm really excited for everybody to continue reporting how their relationship with Saturn is changing and shifting and growing and evolving. Obviously, we have like the next 3 years to explore this together. So this is going to be a work in progress, I think, for all of us. But I love that word mastery that is associated with Saturn a lot. So this is our opportunity to really master that Saturnian energy and how we work with it in our own lives, in our own ways, with our own expression. So thank you, Donna, for helping to guide the way with that. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for making astrology a part of your life. I look forward to catching you on the next session.